Hello and welcome to Old School Garage. My name is Nicholas, and today I'm going to be working on my 1971 Dodge L1000. And we're going to be doing some cool stuff, or at least I think it's cool stuff, and showing some modifications that I've made with the cooling lines and everything like that. We're also going to discuss some issues that I have encountered and some things that I'm going to need to fix in regards to the cooling system, as well as some modifications that I'm going to be making for some future videos. So before I get started with that, let me say a special thank you to ProTech Powder Coating for sponsoring my channel. And if you have any powder coating needs that you need taken care of, like frames, wheels, anything like that, please reach out to them and they will be able to take care of you with that and tell them that I sent you. So now let's tilt this bad boy forward and we'll start talking about the cooling system. All right, so now that I've got the cab tilted forward, we're going to talk about the main cooling lines first, which you have your inlet to the engine here and you have your outlet from the engine there. So first things up really is the lines that were used, they worked, they just weren't great. They're just muffler tubing and then obviously some hose here. This guy's 2 1/4 inch and it worked. Whoever welded these did a fairly good job. They're not leaking. They weren't leaking when I got the truck. And the main issue was that they're just a big square. They don't have a 90 or a sweep or anything like this. So basically they're not that great for flow, as well as these were a pain to get off and I'm lazy. So I devised a solution, at least I'm hoping it's a solution, it doesn't cause issues, that I'm going to change fittings, or fitting styles, if you will, to a sanitary fitting, which is called a tri-clamp, sanitary ferrule, whatever you want. There's multiple jargon terms for them. But the idea is that you undo this guy here. Obviously it'd be easier on the truck. Undo this guy, your clamp comes off, and then these two separate. All right, so this guy obviously mounts to the hose end, or the barbed end if you will, and then your tubing can basically go in place without ever really having to come apart fully, so you're not sitting there fighting the tubing and pulling it apart and everything like that. The biggest issue with these, if you will, is the fact that they take up a lot of space, because you can see this is a 2 1/2 inch, or I'm sorry, yeah, 2 1/2 inch tubing, and you can see how big that is. It's probably close to 3 1/2, well actually probably just 3 inches. They are fairly big, so clearancing things can be an issue and they might not always be the best case scenario for it. But you can buy these sanitary fittings with barbed ends, so there's a barbed end inside here, and you simply attach it to the hose, obviously, and then you figure out your measurements for the piping and everything. So I feel like this will be a big quality of life change whenever you have to service this engine. You can simply undo the clamps and you're good to go. There's no hassling with trying to fight the hose off or anything like that. It is my first time doing this, so the welds are not perfect, but I did get full penetration on the welds. I did purge the tubing, because you need to purge stainless as the chromium oxide builds up inside on the other side of the weld. So as you can see, it's not very consistent or anything like that. And I'm not looking at this guy, but if you look down inside there, you can see the full penetration on the weld. I'm trying to show it. Now, this is just muffler tubing, like cheap muffler tubing, and then a sanitary flange. So sanitary tubing is much thicker. So as you can see, I was struggling with consistency on full penetration like that. Obviously this would not be sanitary rated or anything like that. And sanitary welding is also done autogenously, whereas this is, I used a filler metal. But overall, for my first time ever doing anything tubing like this, I think it came out all right. It's definitely not perfect, but it'll work for the time being at least. So now that I've converted that stuff, so I have my outlet and my inlet converted. I have another set of tubes that go right here. One goes there. And one goes there. Now these I'm going to be converting at a later date, but my issue with them is that the flares that were made from Cummins are pretty good at, cutting the O-ring, which would go over this flare right here, and it would seat down in this flange down inside there on both ends. So I'm more than likely going to end up turning something on the lathe that suits this style a little bit better, because I think this is a little bit safer in terms of not cutting the O-ring, and it looks nicer. But I'll be doing it completely out of stainless, and then I will end up welding those flanges I make to a set of tubing or pieces of tubing that are bent to the correct lengths and angles and everything like that. So those lines will be completely stainless, and then I'll more than likely end up painting over them with the Cummins tan. But they will be stainless, so they won't corrode away. So that will be a future video. I will be remaking these for the time being. I just need to fix this guy. This guy's a bit rotted. I need to fix that little section right there and then make sure this clamp is welded correctly. And then this is staying just like this until I'm able to fully remake this tubing. All right, so the next piece here, we're up just above the engine, and we have our, I believe is our water outlet and our water inlet to the thermostat area for the aftercooler. The aftercooler is obviously inside the intake manifold, and there was originally a piece of rubber here going up to a plastic fitting that shot over. I'm not sure what Cummins had originally, but I went ahead and just used some 1-inch stainless tubing to recreate basically a 90-degree piece of tubing, obviously. And so I'll just need to put a piece of tubing or a hose over this guy to this guy, and then over that guy to that guy. And that will allow me to have, first of all, a cleaner looking fitting here, as well as stronger. And then it'll be easier to remove, simply that, it's one big piece that you can grab a hold of than a bunch of tiny little pieces having to pull around on it and everything like that. So this will be another, semi-decent change that I will be making. So let's go ahead and get everything installed real quick so I can show everything set up. And then we're going to move on to the fuel filter mount and the main inlet line, which I have changed on the fuel line, or towards the PT pump. All right, I've gone ahead and installed everything. And I did use silicone grease on every single fitting so that it doesn't rust underneath. It's just a little bit easier to take off the next time. Just trying to help the next guy out. But as you can see, there is a difference here between 2.5 and 2 1/4. But I was able to make up the difference. I may end up trying to get a 2 1/4 hose on later at some point. I don't know yet. But there is enough slack, if you will, if you want to call it that, in these. It's not like they're crazy tight in terms of there's no movement, so I'm not going to be cracking anything. This one's already more than the previous one. And then this guy, I can't really show it on camera because I'm just going to shake with it, but you can see it's got a ton of movement in it, so nothing's going to crack. I'm not going to have to worry about the flanges or anything like that. And then this guy, the same thing to the aftercooler. Good amount of movement, nothing crazy, or truly it doesn't matter on this guy, actually, now that I'm looking at it, because it's between two solid points like this. But so we're pretty good here on how this turned, or we look pretty good here on how this turned out, in my opinion at least. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think it's a good idea to use the tri-clamps? You can see everything clears. The fan is probably about half an inch to an inch away, so we got more than enough clearance there. And you can see from this side, everything looks great. Tried to keep everything as straight as I could, but I'll be replacing this line as well, this water line right here, going up. I'll do that in hardline, and possibly that one, I don't know yet. That guy goes, it goes right in there. towards the water pump. So I don't know, there's things like that you got to be careful when you're changing hard lines. It's less about vibration and more about, will it be easy to fix? When you start getting into these bigger hard lines, and I'll show you in a second, you don't have to worry as much about vibration. If you look at, this is just a 5/8 line right here. You can see that's 065 wall. It's not like this copper tubing, this soft copper tubing, like this stuff in here, even this 5/8 line underneath here. You don't have to worry as much about cracking when you get into these bigger lines. I know there were a couple comments last video when I was talking about changing over hard lines on this. If you structure the lines correctly in terms of they're supported and if they need to be supported, and you're sizing the line correctly, so if you're using a 1-inch hard line in stainless line, 316 stainless, and you want more strength, you would go with a higher wall rating just so that it has more vibration resistance. You're still going to encounter vibration, but you can do everything in your power to limit it, and you're not going to crack an 095 316 stainless wall, at least not on this application for just trucks. So there's not really a whole lot of vibration that goes on trucks as compared to like other equipment or crushers or something like that. So it's perfectly fine to use hard lines. You just can't be stupid and say, run a hard line here to something that's mounted on the frame rail, because the movement of the engine will crack the line or break a fitting. So that's all stuff you have to consider, as well as heat expansion, and I'll get into this in a later video. I'm just trying to do a basic overview a little bit. Stainless does have comparable expansion rates to cast iron when it heats up, like at similar temperatures. So expansion you don't have to worry about as much with stainless, but you still do. So making things like where the line is slightly shorter to where it's not going to be, you know, completely crammed in between 2 points. If I was to run a line between here and here, that it's just shorter so that when the line expands, it's not going to be putting a ton of pressure between these 2 points trying to crack something. So it's just things like that which you have to worry about, which now brings me to my second point here of this video, which is this line back here, which I'm going to be replacing. So this guy is a flex line, obviously. There was a a hard line in between here and here, and that hard line just basically was a 90. There was nothing special to it, and then there were 2 1-inch hoses in between there. My plan is to convert this from a 3/4 inch pipe thread here to 3/4 inch pipe thread up here, so that I can use standard compression fittings like these Swagelok fittings, which Swagelok is just the brand, it's the twin ferrule design. So I'll have a 3/4 inch stainless line from here all the way down to this fitting. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. All right, so basically you got your aftercooler inside here. It's this guy. There's a mounted unit inside here, and there's a O-ring. It's a big shaft with a groove, and then there's an O-ring in that groove. You can see the O-ring right there on top. And the job of that O-ring is simply to seal in this face right here, which it would slip on like that. You put your 2 bolts in, and it goes down to your main water jacket, which is on this side, which is 1.5 inch pipe thread. So basically all that I did was measured my inside diameter here, and then almost every dimension, and then added on for what 3/4 inch pipe would be, the distance I would need for 3/4 inch pipe. And I measured my stick out, and I made this. So this is out of 316 stainless. It started as a bar like this, solid chunk of stainless. It was supposed to have been annealed, so it wasn't like stressed or anything, but it turned out really nice, good surface finish on it. I am gonna probably end up polishing the inside or getting it just a little bit better than what it is right now. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's really good, but I'm thinking it could be a little bit better. So I may end up polishing that inside, and then I kind of want to flare this outer edge similar to this, but I need to find someone with a capability to flare 1.5 inches. So as you can see, there's pipe thread that's 3/4 inch pipe thread, which then it would go, here's the flange that I made, which simply just needs to be cut out like that. I'd obviously center it and everything like that, but I'm recreating that outer dimension, which would then slip down like so. And then I just need to weld it. And I'll have a new flange here that basically will convert it to 3/4 inch pipe. So as you can see there. So we've got a fair amount of stick out on our threads so that if we decide that we need to go deeper because something is broken, we can, but it's not going to bottom the fitting out. So you can see it's not directly in line, but it will end up dropping straight down, and it's going to shoot over, and then it's going to make a U and go into a fitting that is straight coming out of this. Now the reason I'm doing that is because mainly if I was trying to connect a point here where we have a plane here and we have another plane this way, to be able to fit a 3/4 inch piece of solid tubing would be rather difficult. So I'm simply going to make it come down, and it will swing in, a big hoop will swing in straight, and it will go into a straight fitting here. So that will allow me to basically accomplish that with making it easier to install. And I have plenty of space out here. It's not like I'm wasting anything. So this will be a later video, also when I redo the drain line from the turbo in solid stainless, as well as that's going to be an interesting bend. I would press this on right now, but then I would have to, it'd be kind of difficult to do with one hand. So we'll show this at a later date when I press it on fully and show everything to that. But I did put a tiny radius in there just to make it smoother. So that's coming up, so get ready for that. But the final part of this video, which is going to be what changes I made here on the side of the block and for the main inline tube. So obviously, well not obviously, but prior there would have been bolts that held on the fuel filter, which I'll be installing in just a second, and you'll get to see that. So it would have been just a normal bolt that held on the fuel filter holder, but I decided to convert it to studs, as studs are a lot easier to work with, especially with something like this. So you're just having to hold the item up and you're not having to try and thread a bolt in. So it's just a little bit easier to work with. And then I'm going to also show installing this guy and installed. So it'll be a huge difference having basically stainless from the filter forward. So let's get on that. All right, so I basically just turned, or didn't turn, but I took 9/16 fine thread, all thread, and made me some studs, nothing special. And I've already obviously installed them. So now I'm just gonna apply anti-seize to the studs. You should always use anti-seize, especially on stuff like this. There are certain applications you don't want to use, like it might require dry threads, in which case you just use dry threads. But anything like this, it's always a good idea to use anti-seize, especially on stainless, to prevent galling. Now we're going to install a freshly painted part here. Put our throttle thingamajig up. Now we just install our nuts and washers. Click. All right, now here comes the fun part, which is fitting the hard line. So I've let it loose a little bit. Hopefully it's enough. Yep. It is. So we're gonna barely thread it on and see if our holes line up, which they don't. So we're gonna back this guy off one turn. Try again. And now we're ready to fit this. Now that I've got that tight, I'm just going to take our inspection gauge. We're good there. We're good there. And then just need to tighten that O-ring nut. All right, that one's done. Now we tighten these guys. All right, here's the finished product. As you can see, the studs look pretty good. Let me go around to the other side. And the hard line looks pretty good as well. It's a lot better than the OEM one. Now I did have to make a change here. You can see there's a stainless Allen screw right there. I made this into a 90. Originally it would have been, or I'm sorry, a straight. Originally it would have been a 90, and it had a hose coming down that went up the other side to a 90 here. And the issue I found with that is if I wanted to move this fitting or remove this fitting, I couldn't, because the pulsating damper, which is that guy on the back, this guy back here, was in the way because the 90 would hit that. So I had to remove that, and then of course the bottom screw was seized to the aluminum, and I ended up having to drill that. I ended up drilling it out, and you can see I was a little bit off, but it was that bottom screw. And that was not fun because it was truly seized to the aluminum and I couldn't get the aluminum off. So with lots of prying and lots of work, I finally got it, but then obviously had to replace the screw. Nothing else broke on the gear pump, but it definitely took a minute to get it out. So to resolve that issue, I just simply made it a straight here, and that makes it even easier to make this a hard line, which the only other thing I had to truly worry about was it striking this guy right here, which it doesn't. We have probably 1/4 of an inch of clearance between the hard line and this throttle linkage bracket right here. So we are good to go on that, and it's looking pretty good. So that does it for this video. If you've gotten to this point, thank you for watching my video. Obviously a lot changed with just doing this with the 2 cooling lines, the main cooling lines, the one small one for the after cooler, and then obviously doing the stainless line for the fuel filter mount and stuff like that. So it's little things like that that slowly progress the build along. If you enjoyed this format of how I filmed this video, it is slightly different than how I have filmed other videos in the past, in terms of less showing removing things, less showing all the basic work, and just showing the final product, more of the cool stuff. If you enjoy that, please let me know in the comments, as your feedback is invaluable. I mean, y'all are the ones that are supporting this whole thing right here in terms of me filming everything and trying to document it. So any feedback that you think I should change or anything like that, I greatly appreciate the feedback. So obviously still have a lot of work on this, still have a lot of work on the 68 and every other vehicle. I can't catch a break, but We do have a new lift cylinder for the 68 standing right next to me. We will be doing a video on that here shortly, where I will be fitting this new cylinder to this truck as it is not made for this truck. I have to convert some things, and I'll be showing all that. As well as I have some historical videos with ads, manuals, and things you need to look out for when you're purchasing these trucks, in terms of looking for the manuals, the literature, and stuff like that. Cool stuff to collect. So I also have some other videos coming up on the yellow and green truck, as well as my Imperial. Can't forget about the Imperial. A lot of work to go on that as well. So we're one step closer to finally getting this Soul Girl sealed up so we can get some water flowing through her, and then we can actually start just letting it run and truly running it. There's still a lot of work before we get to the point of moving the truck, but we're getting a little bit closer. So there's a couple of really big hurdles I have to get past on that, in terms of the clutch master, which I will be showing all this, and then the rear drivetrain suspension and all that stuff, and obviously the frame rails. So again, one step closer. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as that is what drives the YouTube channel and the algorithm and spreading this. Don't forget to tell people in real life, if someone might like this kind of a content, please share my videos with them, so we can grow this community even bigger. So again, I appreciate you following along through this entire process. Again, please let me know what you think down in the comments, and y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and y'all have a blessed one.